What's up, fellas? In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some important NBA trades in recent history that you might have forgotten about. I'm pretty confident that there are trades on this list that some of you forgot about or never knew about in the first place, and it's just really interesting to look back on these trades because they're really critical, they're really important, but for some reason they've kind of flown under the radar in this crazy new, player movement era of the NBA in which there's a lot of movement. So that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. But quickly, before we get started, if you're enjoying content like this, then consider subscribing. What's up? My name is Tucker. I upload NBA stuff on this channel twice a day, every single day. It's the most consistent NBA content on YouTube. If that's something you're looking for, you found the right place. You can also leave a like rating on the videos as well if you're enjoying the content. Helps get the video out to more people on YouTube. And you can check me out at various socials at the bottom of the screen and a Linktree link in the description below. With all those things said, let's go ahead and get started and talk about some of these NBA trades you might have forgotten about. The first one involves Kyrie Irving. So as you kind of look back at the history of the Cleveland Cavaliers, it makes sense as to why Kyrie Irving ended up there in Cleveland. They weren't very good at the time that he was drafted. He goes first overall. It makes sense why the Cavs would have the first overall pick. But they actually had two picks in that draft. They had to pick at 1, which they selected Kyrie Irving, and they had the 4th overall pick as well that they used to select Tristan Thompson. So it wasn't their own pick that they ended up getting Kyrie Irving with. So whose pick was it? Well, there was actually a deal made in which the Clippers sent Baron Davis to Cleveland in addition to an unprotected first-round pick that became first overall in Kyrie Irving. So essentially, the Clippers could have had Kyrie or whoever they wanted to choose at first overall in that draft, and they squandered that opportunity because they wanted to dump the salary of Baron Davis. So the reason that people might have forgotten about this one is because when you look at the history of the Cavs, as I said, it would make total sense for them to have the first overall pick in the draft in which Kyrie came out, but they actually had 2. And the reason why they were able to get Kyrie was because of that Baron Davis trade. It's just crazy to think about the fact that all the other dominoes that followed with Kyrie in Cleveland as it relates to LeBron and Boston and Brooklyn could have been completely different had Kyrie ended up in LA, or if they didn't even select Kyrie with the first pick and he ends up in Minnesota or wherever. It's crazy to think about how just that one small detail and that one trade that, again, I'm sure a lot of people have forgotten about, changed a lot of different things moving forward in NBA history. Now you're kind of understanding where I'm going with this list. Next up now is one that I think it's more memorable than the first one, but the impact that it had, I think, is lost on some people, and that is the Magic trading Victor Oladipo and the pick that became Domantas Sabonis in exchange for Serge Ibaka. So this is in the post-Harden landscape there in Oklahoma City. And, of course, KD ends up leaving, but this is fantastic value for Oklahoma City. And we didn't even realize how fantastic the value was until Oladipo and Sabonis were then later traded to Indiana in exchange for Paul George. If you look at these trade packages, right, there's a crazy line between all these different things. So Ibaka, at the time, according to these two teams, was worth Victor Oladipo and a pick that became Domantas Sabonis, basically on draft night. So it's basically Oladipo and Sabonis for Serge Ibaka, right? And then those two pieces are traded for Paul George, which essentially means Serge Ibaka and Paul George have the same trade value, which they don't, but that's the transitive property of all these trades. And then Serge Ibaka down the road is traded from Orlando not long after he arrived to Toronto in exchange for Terrence Ross, which means that by the transitive property of all these trades, Serge Ibaka and Terrence Ross and Paul George and Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis all have the same trade value, which is kind of an odd one to think about, right? So it's crazy to think about how all that goes down. Sabonis and Oladipo show up to Oklahoma City, and they're good, but they're not great. Oladipo does not become an All-NBA caliber player. Sabonis does not become an All-Star caliber player that he would later on because, of course, he's a rookie. He's basically a glorified spot-up shooter. And then a couple years later, you realize, wow, Victor Oladipo is a really good player. Domantas Sabonis is a really good player. And by the way, Orlando could have had both of them had they just never made the trade, not wanted to go out and get Serge Ibaka. Sabonis would have been a good player, but the biggest missed opportunity here is giving up on Oladipo too soon, because then the future of Orlando is all about the fact that they don't have perimeter talent. They don't have guards. They don't have guys that can create. They don't have anybody that can really, do anything for them on the perimeter. Meanwhile, Victor Oladipo a few years later becomes a great two-way player and a great offensive player and would have been a perfect fit in Orlando had they never made this trade. Next up now on the list is a little bit more convoluted than the ones we've talked about, and it's basically the Wizards trading future first. So there's 2 consecutive years here, 2016 and 2017, in which the Washington Wizards did not select a player in the first round of the draft. That became the 13th pick in the 2016 draft and the 22nd pick in the 2017 draft. And the reason they didn't make a selection in either of those was because they made deadline deals for wings in both of those seasons. In 2016, they made the trade for Markieff Morris in exchange for their unprotected first, and that became the 13th pick, and they went 41-41 in that season. Then the following season, they traded the 22nd pick in the 2017 draft as a future first in exchange for Bojan Bogdanovic. Now, the team did win 49 games that year, and they were good. However, Bogdanovic only played 26 regular season games, was like 12 points per game, wasn't a huge difference maker for them. And my point here is, in any other way in which Washington would have wanted to use these picks, it arguably could have helped them more than either of the players they acquired. Now, Morris was a fine player for them, but Bogdanovic just ended up in a completely different scenario and a completely different team after they made this trade. He signs with Indiana the following offseason, and they basically just gave away their first-round pick. Now, in 2016, here are some players that were drafted 13th or later that Washington could have had an opportunity to select had they not made the trade for Markieff Morris. Malik Beasley, Karis LeVert, Pascal Siakam, DeJounte Murray, and Malcolm Brogdon all would have been available at the 13th pick or later. Meanwhile, in 2017, players that would have been available at 22nd or later had Washington held on to their first-round pick, Jared Allen, OG Anunoby, Kyle Kuzma, and Derek White all would have been available. Now, that would be assuming that they would actually make the correct selection, but the point is, if they had kept those picks, they could have traded them for someone more significant than 26 games of Bogdanovic or Markieff Morris, who again was fine for them, or they could have just kept the picks and drafted a good young player, because those teams were notoriously top heavy, and that's one of the reasons they wanted to trade their picks for an actual piece, because that would help round out their rotation. But at the end of the day, it's not like the Wizards were contending for a title and they were giving away first-round picks as if they were one move away for 2 consecutive years there. And had they hadn't, I could make the argument that they would have been significantly better, not only in the moment, but in the future as well, if they had hit on either of those first-round picks. And as a result of not only that, but of course some John Wall injury stuff, that era of Wizards basketball basically completely fell apart. And part of it was because they gave away some of their future in order to chase guys that helped them some, but not a ton in the case of Bogdanovic. And then last up now on the list is one that I'm not necessarily sure anybody has forgotten, but I think we've forgotten the potential impact of this. And it's DeMarcus Cousins going to the New Orleans Pelicans. And the headliner here was that Buddy Hield would be going to Sacramento, where he still is, in exchange for Boogie. But the whole focus of this for me is on the New Orleans Pelicans side of this, because the way it's kind of remembered is Boogie goes to New Orleans and it was kind of awkward, and then he gets hurt, and then AD wants to leave, and then Boogie goes somewhere else in free agency, and the Golden State thing doesn't work out, and then there's kind of the tragedy of Boogie's career, and then Anthony Davis ends up in LA. However, they were kind of starting to figure something out there in New Orleans between DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis right before he got hurt. And you can make the argument that had Boogie never gotten hurt, Anthony Davis at worst would have still been in New Orleans for at least another season if Boogie was still going. Like, if they're rocking and rolling, they're winning 45 and 50 games, I think it's more difficult for Anthony Davis to realistically work his way out of New Orleans. Now, he could have just been completely headstrong towards the idea of going to LA, but that part is kind of forgotten. It wasn't always awkward. They were starting to figure it out, and then Boogie gets hurt, and the rest is history. So that's another one to look back on and kind of keep an eye on, is the fact that had DeMarcus Cousins never gotten hurt, that Boogie trade could have been a huge, huge difference maker for New Orleans, because they could have kept one of the best players they've ever had in franchise history in Anthony Davis, and all the other impacts of that down the road. The Lakers potentially not winning this most recent title because AD waits another year or never leaves New Orleans in the first place. Crazy, crazy stuff to think about as you look back. But those are going to be some of those trades I'm talking about where I feel like some people might have forgotten about them. Baron Davis salary dump leads to Kyrie. The Magic trading Oladipo and Sabonis for Ibaka. The Wizards trading away multiple first-round picks for not a whole lot. And Boogie going to New Orleans and the ripple effect potentially of that. But yeah, that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, be sure to check out the boxes on screen, as well as the channel as a whole, as I said, for that super consistent NBA content. You can leave a like rating on the videos as well if you're enjoying them. Helps get the videos out to more people on YouTube, and you can check me out at the various socials at the bottom of the screen and a link tree down in the description below. With all those things said, hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.